The Avodas HaParsha shir this week is sponsored by my good friend Dr. Mendel Kupfer and his family in memory of Mendel's grandfather, Rabbi Eliezer ben Reb Chaim Menachem Mendel, Olav HaShalom. It be the Ilui Nishmaso and a schus for the entire Kupfer family. Okay, so Parshas Tzav. Parshas Tzav. A famous Rashi on the first pasuk, but hard to understand Rashi. We're going to look tonight at the Divrei Yisrael, the first Modzitz Rebbe, who brings explanation after explanation of this first Rashi on the first pasuk. We'll sample a few of them and try to understand them and add and mix.
Is this the Modzitz Rebbe that was the Baal Nigun?
Oh, so this was the one that wrote the famous Nigun, the Ezkra. Yeah, that while he was having an operation in Vienna. So apparently the anesthetics weren't so good. He woke up, he looked out the window. No, it's Berlin. And he saw Berlin built in its glory. So he created this nigun. He was a tremendous composer, a very long, complex nigun, like a symphony, on the words, Esker Elokim ve'amoya, I remember Hashem, and I like sigh. Birosi kolir al tila benuya, when I see every city built up on its hill, ve'ir Elokim mushpeles, and the city of Hashem is downtrodden, ad shol tachtia, to the depths. Like, it didn't appear on any of the records because it's so long and complex. You can find it online. They would sing it on his yahrzeit at different, takes quite a while to sing. But they were fabulous composers, and tremendous Talmidei Chachamim, tremendous workers on behalf of Am Yisrael in all sorts of ways. Okay, so the Rashi, which he's going to speak about, is on this first pasuk, Vaydaber Hashem Moshe lemor, Tzav es Aaron ve'es bonov lemor, Zos Toras ha'olah, hi ha'olah al mokdo mizbeach kol halayla ad haboker ve'eshem mizbeach tukadbo. Okay, so this is the command introducing. Now we're starting to get into specifics of korbanos. The korban ha'olah. Okay, the korban ha'olah, we would have the olah was a korban tamid that we would bring every day. So Rashi brings on this word tzav es Aaron. Okay, it's kind of a unique type of form that we don't find throughout the Torah, right? We will have Daber al Aaron vel bonov, Emor al Aaron vel bonov. Tzav, very strong lashon, command. So Rashi says, Ein tzav ela lashon ziruz, miyad uledoros. He says, so tzav is an idea of, ziruz means to energize something, to propel someone to do something, right? The midah of zrizus. Again, just opening parentheses a second, the Kotzker Rebbe said people mistakenly identify zrizus as doing things quickly. Sometimes it's that, but he says a person, oftentimes you'll see him rushing around doing stuff. He's not a zariz, he said, he's just lazy to think, right? He doesn't want to think about things. Zrizus means, like when we say in the Gemara, Kohanim zrizim heim, it means that the Kohanim are very careful and they're not going to make mistakes. It doesn't necessarily mean, again, it can sometimes, it means you're fully focused, fully energetic when you're doing it. So oftentimes that'll be expressed in speed, right? But that's what we have. So here, this is what he's telling Aaron Bonov about the Korban Olah. And Rashi brings this strange idea, miyad, for now, and for generations. Okay, which obviously gets the question in our mind, the Torah is eternal, right? And we don't bring the Korban Olah as a korban right now, so how does it apply to generations? And then he throws in this statement by Rabbi Shimon, Amar Rabbi Shimon, B'yoser tzorech ha'kosuv l'zarez b'mokom chisaron sheyesh bo chisaron kis, from the Sifra. He says, you know why the Torah has to say here, tzav, a lashon of ziruz, of propelling and energizing? Because there's lots of money involved. When there's chisaron kis is like your purse, usually in the lashon of Chazal. If you're going to lose some money, so that's hard. You need some extra push. Okay, so before we get to the Divrei Yisrael, I'll just mention one question that the Talmud Rebbe mentioned that should be pretty obvious, meaning the Korban Olah was a communal korban. And it was basically a sheep, right? In the morning and at night. So for all of Am Yisrael chipping in for a sheep, that's not so expensive. If we look back at the Truma for the Mishkan, there was gold and silver and jewels of all kinds. That was Chisar Kis, that was expensive stuff. And we didn't find a lashon of tzav, of ziruz, for the donations to the Mishkan. So he answered an answer with human psychology. He says the trick here is that it was tamid, right? Meaning for a person to get fired up to give a one-time donation, even a big one, is easier. But when you have to keep giving and giving and giving every day, and it's never going to stop for the rest of your life, each time it's hard. It parallels the statement the Rambam says in Parshas on Pirkei Avos. He asks the question, if you have $1,000, what is better, to give $1,000 to one poor person or to give $1 to 1,000 poor people? So he says, in terms of what it does for your neshama, giving $1 to 1,000 poor people is more beneficial to your neshama. Because every time it's difficult, and every time you have to break that meter of wanting to hold on to the dollar and not give it. Okay, so that's a very important thing to realize. It's the same thing with Kriyus Itim LaTorah. To stay up Shavuos night, people all into it. But to learn 15 minutes a day, every day, all day, every year, really, really hard. Okay, so these are things that need that. So now let's look at the Divrei Yisrael and a few of his perushim. Let's start with this. He quotes his father, I believe that was Rav Cheskel of Kuzmir, on a pasuk in Tehillim. It says, Ki ya'amod li min evyon, that Hashem stands to the right of an evyon. We just did matonos levyonim, which is not just an oni, but that's a person who's really poor. Right? They tell the joke about a person very medactic in halacha, and he carefully interviewed poor people to make sure that he would have 100% needy evyon to give his matonos levyonim. He had absolutely nothing, so he lines them up and he gives his matonos levyonim. He says, may Hashem grant that next year you will also be entirely destitute and I'll be able to do the mitzvah again. Anyway, so Hashem is omed liyamin evyon. Hashem stands to the right of this evyon. Loshia mishofte nafsho, to save him from, shofte can mean two things, judgment, and it can also mean almost like makos, like shvatim b'mitzrayim, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu judged them, but also like tortured them, so to speak, caused them to suffer. So he asked, why nafsho? Why should the nefesh of a poor person be different than the nefesh of a rich person? The nefesh is spiritual. It's the same in a rich person and a poor person. It should say mishofte gufo, from the suffering of his body, because he's malnourished and he doesn't have to keep his house warm and he doesn't have proper clothing. Why did it say nafsho? So he says, because the evyon, poverty is something that strikes a person spiritually as well. It's hard, it's debilitating. And the poor person tries to strengthen himself and have bitachon in Hashem and to believe that this is the situation that's best for him right now, and that's what's supposed to be, and then Hashem knows of it and still loves him. And then he says the Yetzer Hara comes to do shoftei nafsho. The Yetzer Hara wants him to do what's called cheshbon hanefesh. He says, come here, sit down. Did you ever wonder why you're so poor? Let's look back at all the bad things you've done in life. Let's look at all the mitzvahs you didn't do. Makes sense, doesn't it? That's why you're so poor. So he says, no, this is a cheshbon sheker. This is a lie. Because it's clear that that's not the time for you to be even doing such introspection. Right? It seems strange. We say when a person has Yisurim coming on him, it says in the Gemara, Yifash Beish B'maisov. Look at your deeds. But Mefarshim explain that what you're looking for there is a clear midah keneged midah. I mean, something that jumps out at you that says, oh, this is it. I stole $500 from that guy and now I just lost $500. Okay, there you're looking for a quick message like that. But it doesn't mean you're supposed to dig deep, deep, deep into every sin you did since kindergarten and say that that's why you're poor. Okay, that's not what a person is supposed to be doing. This is part of a plan which is there. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there to stand next to that Evyon who's trying to have bitachon, who's trying to keep his spirits up, who's trying to be strong, right, to help him from that. So that's why there has to be an idea of ziruz when something comes to chisar and kis, because chisar and kis makes a person feel unloved, makes a person feel discriminated against. It's painful when they see others who have and there have not. So he says that's why we need ziruz. In other words, he's generalizing it, not just here for the Korban Ha'olah, but in general. Reb Shimon said a statement in general. You need ziruz in a place where a person is in poverty. The Gemara in Eruvin says, Anius mavir al das kono. Poverty causes a person to not follow the will of his Creator. Right? There is, people point out that there is a chazal that says, Yo anius el Yisrael, that poverty actually is fitting from Yisrael. But especially in this school of Polish rabbis, they were very, that doesn't apply to us now, maybe applies to certain people, certain situations in our world now. Poverty doesn't do anything positive spiritually. It does negative. Doesn't mean they have to be a billionaire either. But they always try to be mashpia, that everybody should have plenty of what they need. And we'll see more about that in a second. Okay, so that is one picture of this idea of ziruz b'makom chisar and kis. A person has to be prepared sometimes when you're in such a state, and some of the worst times is when a person was wealthy and then loses it. Right? It's a galgal chozer ba'olam. Chazal say that wealth it rolls. That's why money is called zuzim, because they're zuz. Coins are round also, right? For some reason, you don't see that they never made square or triangular coins. Right, the hexagonal kind of, but it's still kind of round. It just has a few thingies. So this is the idea that money moves from place to place, and a person has to be prepared to keep up their spirits when they have to. I was very impressed once. At one point, there's the famous Reichman family from Toronto. So at one point, they made a big investment in London, something which was called Canary Wharf, and it really crashed very badly. And they lost a huge amount of their net worth. I mean, again, it wasn't that they needed chicken for Shabbos, but it was a large amount of money. It really changed. And I saw an interview with one of the Reichman brothers, and they said, how did you handle this? Did you go into crisis? He says, we always viewed ourselves as trustees of this money that Hashem gave us, and they really did a tremendous amount of good stuff. So he let us handle his money for these years. Now he's moving it on elsewhere, which is a very healthy way of looking at it. Okay, now he continues on. He says that when a person wants to start doing something in Torah or mitzvahs, so right away there are going to be all sorts of obstacles, distractions, problems that are going to stop you from doing it. Now he says, or with davening, right? Suddenly you really want to get to shul on time, endless things come up and happen. Now he says there are distractions to wealthy people and distractions to poor people. Okay, a wealthy person has just got so much going on. He's got his investment in this fund and that fund and this real estate and that real estate and all these things, and he's always checking what's up, what's down. It's very hard to help cope, and you always feel you have to do something. I was going to do my chavrusa, but I got to tell my broker that we got to sell or whatever it is. A poor person also has a hard time learning because the dochak and the oni, the stress of poverty, stop him from doing it. Okay? So it's interesting. He brings like a Hasidic parish on a statement, the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Ein Adam Chazoka Ein Adam Mamid Atzmo al Mamono. It's talking about a person who's breaking into a house, why the homeowner is allowed to kill that robber who's breaking in. Because the robber makes a cheshbon, he thinks out in his mind, this chazaka, a homeowner is not going to sit still and just let you take everything from his house. He's going to try and stand up and protect his property. And therefore, he could end up killing you, the robber. So you, the robber, are entering the house to kill or be killed. Okay, but he explains it like this. Ein adam mamid atzmo al mamono. He says, a person can't stand. Standing la'amod means tefillah. Right? Amida is a tefillah. Lashon Chazal. He says, you can't stand up in tefillah when you have so much worries about money. Right? Anyone who's had that, it comes into Shemona Esrei all the time, all those different things. Okay, so therefore he says we need ziruz, miyad uledoras. We need energizing when it comes to chisron kis. When a person's in a state of poverty, of difficulty. So you need ziruz miyad, meaning if there's a mitzvah that comes to your hand, al tachmitzena, right? Try to grab it right away. And to realize that you have to do what you have to do within the difficult situation. Mitoch the tirdos. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu understands this. Right? It isn't that you can suddenly hypnotize yourself before you go to learn or daven and say, really, I'm the richest man in the world, etc., and you be happy. You know that you don't know how to pay the bills, and that will distract you. And the quality of your learning may suffer. You're not a Superman, but that's very precious to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what he wants. And in fact, he says, so the tirdus of the usher, the distractions of the wealthy person, with all due respect, it is easier for you to kind of turn off your phone and to zone in on learning. They don't enter your inner world as much, right? It comes from having so much and having so much going on. But the pain of the poor person makes it very, very hard for him to turn his heart and mind to learning and to mitzvahs, right? It's very difficult, but he has to still hang on and do what he can. That's what the pasuk says in Koheles, La'erev al tanach yodecha. So the Yalkut Shimoni says, Im lamadet Torah ba'ashrecha. If you learn Torah while you were wealthy, al teshev bato b'shas aniyus. Don't just give up when you become poor. Lefi shetov ma'at b'dochak. A little bit which is done, but under great pressure, is greater than mea pa'amim b'ravacha. It's greater than 100 times when everything is comfortable and luxurious. He says that's why the Yetzer Hara fights so strong against the poor person from even doing the little that he can do. Because the Yetzer Hara knows how precious that is and how powerful that is. Okay, I'll return for a second. I quote endlessly a Parshas of the Kotzker Rebbe on the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, Al tomer lech she'efne eshne shema lo tipone. Right? The standard Parshas is, don't keep putting it off, right? The rabbi comes to the guy in shul, Joe, why don't you come to the shir on Sunday morning? You should learn, Rabbi. You know I'm such a busy guy, but when I retire, I'm going to come to all the shirim. Okay, but the day after he gets his gold watch, unfortunately, has a heart attack, he never got to do it. So the Mishnah says, don't say when I have time I'll learn, maybe you won't have time. It's not under your control. Kotzker Rebbe explained it a different way. The word ponui means that like when I'm free, but not necessarily have free time, but my heart and mind are free. A person honestly says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I would like to learn, but to be honest, with my life, you know what's going to happen. If I go try to sit in the shir, my mind is going to wander with all my problems. Or because I'm so exhausted, I'm going to fall asleep in a couple minutes. If I try to read a little chumash or learn this, if you ask me the next day, what did you learn? I won't remember. Because I'm exhausted and I'm stressed. That's not learning. Okay, that's not respectful to learning. When you give me a life where I don't have all that stuff, and I can really learn, and I can jump in and enjoy and remember and ask questions and do, then I'll learn. Answers the Mishnah, Shema lo tipone. I mean, why don't you think, he said, the bistai lo tipone yid. Who gave you that life that you have? Kadosh Baruch Hu gave you that life. And he knows what Torah you can learn in that life and what Torah you can't learn in that life. So the Torah that you can learn in that life, even though it looks very limited and it's nothing they're going to write storybooks about, that's exactly the Torah you're supposed to bring into the world and to contribute to Am Yisrael, and is very precious to him. Okay, so that's a very powerful type of lesson. If a person, right, manages to do it under those pressures, so then it's very great. Okay, now let's move into the fact that we're talking here about a korban olah. Okay, now the korban olah, Chazal said that the different korbanos atoned, were mechaper for different things. The korban olah is what's called hirhur halev. Okay, hirhur halev, thoughts in the heart. Somewhat what people would call fantasies, things like this. Okay, now the standard way to understand it is about things that are forbidden. He says there's another thing. He says it's about good thoughts that you had that you didn't follow up on. Right? That's, so many times you have a good idea, something you'd like to do, something you want to do, I should do this, and it just flies off like a butterfly. Right? He says, that's why you need ziruz for these things. When you have a hirhur tov, when you have a good thought, don't be lazy about putting it into action. Try to do even a small beginning a little something of it, right? And then it'll be for now and for those. Then it'll be able to last. The Ramban talks about this, I think, from the Pasuk in Shir HaShirim. Al ta'iru v'al ta'uru es ha'ava ad shetechpotz. When a person feels love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you got to put it into a chayfetz, into some kind of tangible item, right? Don't just let it evaporate and float, okay? That's something a person has to try to see. It parallels somewhat. There's a Zohar Kodesh that says that just like a person is accountable for Lashon Hara that they say, they're held accountable for words that they could say that could bring joy and confidence and healing to other people that you don't say, right? Everything has two sides. If there's a world of hirhure, avera, of thoughts of things that are wrong, but he says here, right, this is the idea why you need zeros, and especially if it comes to chisar and kis. When it comes to something that costs money, so then you can have that initial excitement. You're going to say, oh, I really want to donate to that. But then afterwards, like, okay, other people are probably going to donate to that one, and I have to give to this. And it very quickly goes and evaporates. So again, you don't have to do it all right away. But he says if you just do something, if you start off with a little something, which is real and with is tangible, right, then that's going to help it come into reality. And then that good thought has then, come into the world and actually done something. They tell a story, again, it's, I was surprised in the storybook they actually brought like the name of the rabbi who was involved, a certain town in America. So this rabbi was the principal of the local girls' school, and his many principals, he had to try to raise money as much as he could. There was one very wealthy man in the community, and he would donate to the school, but no matter what, it was only $500. Which again is a nice donation. This man had millions. At one point, he gets a call in his office. The secretary says, you have a call from the hospital, right? Mr. So-and-so there, and he's asking for you to come. So he goes over to the hospital, and this man is there, and he's lying hooked up to all sorts of things, and he can barely talk. He says, Rabbi, I'm so glad you came. He says, this may be the end. I wanted to be sure to leave something. There's an envelope on the table there for you. So he goes over, he opens the envelope, it's a check for $500. So he said, he went over to the man. He said, I don't understand you. He says, you can't take it with you. The school, half the girls are in these temporary trailers, caravaning, what you call. We'll build a new building. Your name will be on it. That'll be your piece of eternity. Well, he said, Rabbi, my head knows that's true. My heart wants to do it. My hand just can't write the check. He said, I just, that's in the story. And, that idea that when, let's say a person can't put big things into action right away, but at least when you get into the habit of doing a little something once you have the thought, then the pipelines stay open, right? They don't dry up. It's not like a well that dries up. It goes as long as a little water is flowing, as long as it's there. So that's what a person's supposed to try to take a look for. That's the idea of zerus. Now he goes, and this was common in his writings, to try and defend Am Yisrael. He would kind of like turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Baruch Shalom. You want us to do our mitzvahs with zrizus. That means to do them with simcha, to do them with energy. So guess what? He says, in order for your children to do mitzvahs like that, they need harchava. You have to give them, stuff that they're not uptight for money, for other things. So Pasuk in Tehillim, derech mitzvosecha arutz, David HaMelech says, I'm going to run in the path of your mitzvahs with zrizus, but when? Ki tarchiv libi, when you let my heart be like broadened, meaning when I'm okay, when I'm not all tightened and stressed out. Like it says with Yaakov Avinu, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised him he'll be taken care of. Vayisla Yaakov Raglov. Yaakov's lifted up his legs, right? He heard the B'sara Tova. HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him he's going to be okay. Then he could do things with zrizus. Okay, so therefore he says this is addressing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and this should be our tefillah for everyone, right? That everybody should have what they need, right? And don't start doing cheshbonos about, he'll daven better if he's poor. These things are not... for whatever reason, and there were some great people who were extremely poor and rose to extremely high levels, But like in many things, tzaddikim say that our generation can't handle things like that. It doesn't do us good. We should want everyone to be able to have what they have. Then HaKadosh Baruch Hu should bless them with everything, and then we'll be able to follow the call of Tzav and do everything with zrizas and simcha.